Hey, first grade. Today we are going to read about the Aztec, Cortez's letter. All right. Our learning objectives for today are to identify parts of a letter, identify key details about the Aztec Empire, demonstrate an understanding of the word enormous, and write about the Aztec. Our key vocabulary are courteous, enormous, and royalty. Courteous is an adjective. Remember, adjectives are our descriptive words, meaning they are the words we use to describe someone or something. Courteous means polite, thoughtful towards others. Students were courteous toward their new teacher and helped her learn everyone's names. Enormous, another adjective. And enormous means very large. I saw an enormous elephant at the zoo. It weighed 2 tons. Royalty. Royalty is a noun, and royalty are people of royal blood or ancestry. Because their father had been king, the children were also royalty. All right, let's review about what we've learned so far. I know that it's been a little while because we had break, but just do your best, okay? I want you to locate where the Maya lived. And I'm going to get my pointer so I can do it too. The Maya. Where did the Maya live? They lived on the Yucatan Peninsula, okay? And what about the Aztec? Where did the Aztec live? The Aztec lived in central Mexico, which is right over here near what we now call Mexico City. And how about Lake Texcoco? Right around Mexico City. Okay, and who was the ruler of the Aztec? What was his name? Moctezuma, okay? And what was the name of the city where his palace was located? It's a funny name. Tenochtitlan, okay? All right, so I'm going to move my face so that I'm not blocking Mr. Hernan Cortez. Oops. All right, so in the story that we read last, who do you think those strangers were? Remember, there were strangers, and the Aztecs thought that they were riding huge deer, but they weren't really riding huge deer, right? They were riding horses, but the Aztec had never seen horses before. So who do you think those strangers that were riding the horses were? So the strangers were actually the Spaniards, which are people from Spain, who sailed to the Aztec region on ships. Many Spanish soldiers and explorers traveled to the Americas after Christopher Columbus made his trip in 1492. One of those explorers was this man, Hernan Cortez, who led the Spaniards to Mexico. So this is Hernan Cortez, all right? And this is Spain. And the Spaniards came from Spain. They went across the Atlantic Ocean over here to North America, more specifically central Mexico, which is where the Aztec lived. Okay, remember our key vocabulary are courteous, enormous, and royalty. Oh, I think my face is going to be in the way again. Oh, keep doing that. So the read aloud today is part of an actual letter that Hernan Cortez, the leader of the Spaniards who sailed to Mexico, wrote to the King of Spain. So what we're reading today is actually part of a real letter that man right here, Hernan Cortez, was writing to the King of Spain. So he went to Mexico and he was writing a letter that was going to go back to Spain to the King of Spain. Okay. Who can tell me, why do we write letters? Why do people write letters? To communicate, okay? And what kind of things might they communicate? Good news, bad bad news, an invitation to something, Christmas cards, get well soon cards. There are all sorts of reasons that you might write a letter, right? So remember that the king is in Spain and Cortez is all the way across the Atlantic in what is now Mexico, okay? So remember, the king is over here and Hernan Cortez is now over here in Mexico. So it has to go all the way over here. And back then, they didn't have cell phones or email or anything like that, so they had to send letters, okay? When you write a letter, what kind of things do you need to include? What kind of things do you need to include when you are writing a letter? So when we write a letter, we normally start with a greeting, okay? And a greeting might be something like, hello, Miss Van Wert, or dear Miss Van Wert, or good morning, Miss Van Wert, or good evening, Miss Van Wert, or hey, Miss Van Wert, okay? So a greeting, kind of like what we do in our morning meetings, you're going to address them, meaning you're going to say hello in some kind of way, okay? And that, in this picture, looks like this, okay? So it says, Dear Miss Bland, okay? So that is the greeting, okay? And then you normally have what's called the body of your letter. And the body of your letter is all of the writer's thoughts. So what you're including in that letter. Okay, so that's going to be your thank yous or your invitation part or your the news that you're trying to tell them, whether it be good news or bad news. Okay, that's the body. So in this part, the body is thank you for the letter you sent last week, as well as the flowers. I hope you have a wonderful day. Okay, so that is the main part that that's what they want to tell the person they're writing to, okay? Then you're going to have a closing. And a closing is going to be words used to finish the letter. You might end it with thank you. You might end it with love or sincerely or what are some other ones? I hope you have a great day. Those are things that could be closing. And in this letter, it says love. And then we have what's called a signature. And that's when you put your name, so who the letter is from. Okay, and in this case, it is Anna. All right. So we've got our greeting, which is Dear Miss Bland. We have our body, which is what the content is. So thank you for the letter you sent last week, as well as the flowers. I hope you have a wonderful day. Then you have your closing, love, and then you have your signature, Anna, which would be your name. So if your name isn't Anna, you're not going to sign your letter with Anna. Okay? All right. So I want you to listen carefully to find out more about the Aztec Empire. All right. This is Hernan Cortez, the Spanish explorer who wrote this letter. Here we go. Your Majesty. So that sounds like that's the greeting, okay? Your Majesty. In order to fully describe, now we're getting into the body, in order to fully describe the city of Tenochtitlan and the Emperor Moctezuma, it would require more writers than just myself and would take a very long time. I will not be able to fully explain everything, but I will do my best to describe the amazing things we have seen. The Aztec state is in the shape of a circle. It is completely surrounded by tall mountains. There are 2 lakes that take up almost the entire valley in which the city is located. One of the lakes is freshwater, and the other is a saltwater lake. The great city of Tenochtitlan is made up of 2 islands that sit in the middle of the salt lake, Lake Texcoco. There are 4 entrances to this enormous city. Remember, enormous means very large, and this picture shows how large their city was, okay? Tenochtitlan. So all of this is their city, all right? In order to cross over the lake into the city, large bridges were constructed. The bridges are so wide that as many as 10 horses walking side by side could cross them. The main streets are very wide and straight. Some of the smaller streets are made of land and some are made of water, similar to streams or canals. The people of the city use canals to travel in the streets made of water. So look and see if you can find any of the bridges that are in this picture. See if you can find any bridges. Okay, now what about canals? Do you see any canals in this picture? I see lots of canals in this picture. And what about the roads? Do you see any of these roads that they're talking about? Yeah, a whole bunch of them, right? So roads in here. There are some canals here. Bridges here, maybe. Okay. Next page. There are several main squares, all of which contain markets. Squares are open areas in a village or city. One of the squares is very large, and on any given day, there are thousands of people in it buying and selling things. Because there are so many different kinds of products, it would be impossible to name every single thing. But some of the items include food, precious stones, shells, feathers, medicines, wood, coal, sleeping mats, clothing, and pottery. So this was more than 200 years before the United States colonies began, okay? So the Aztecs were very advanced, even more advanced than some of the European cities at the time. So they were more developed than some of the European cities back then. Now we have a lot more that we could buy and sell, and we are more developed, but that's because we've had more time to do so, okay? Along with all the items that are for sale, there are also restaurants and barbershops. A building like a courthouse also sits in the market. So a courthouse is a building where lawyers and judges try cases to uphold the law or rules. People in this building are like judges, resolving arguments and ordering punishment for criminals. Also in Tenochtitlan, there are many beautiful temples. The priests, or religious leaders, live in a part of each temple and dress in black. These priests wear the exact same clothing for their whole lives, and they never cut or comb their hair. So they wear the same clothes their entire lives. They don't ever change clothes, and they don't ever cut their hair or brush it. Since the lake surrounding the city is a saltwater lake, there are aqueducts that carry the water from the freshwater lake into the city. Aqueducts are special structures like pipes or bridges that carry water from one place to another. So this right here is the aqueduct, all right? The aqueducts carry the water over the bridge. Once over the bridge, the water is distributed throughout the city to be used for drinking and other purposes. The water from the aqueducts makes up the whole city's water supply. It is quite amazing to see. So, do you guys think that Cortez is impressed by the Aztec city? I think so. Why? How do we know that he's impressed? What did he say? He said that it was quite amazing to see, right? Okay. So, order has been established and is well kept in the city. The people of the city are very friendly and courteous to one another and behave much in the same way as Spaniards. I found this most surprising because of how different they and their city look from ours. So, the Aztec people, are nice and they're helpful to each other and they make the city a peaceful place to be where everything works well. All right. Oopsie. There we go. All right. In regard to Emperor Moctezuma, his empire is quite unbelievable. I have been unable to find out how large of an area he rules. I believe he rules a land at least as large as Spain. So this means that Cortez thinks that Moctezuma's empire is very big. Okay. It was as big as the state of Utah. So Utah is a state in the United States. And that's about how big the Aztec Empire was. All right. However, I have seen with my own eyes his great wealth. He possesses many, many objects made from gold, silver, and other precious metals, all made by wonderful craftsmen. Within the city, there are quite a few places so wondrous that I could not possibly describe them adequately. One of the smaller palaces is attached to a beautiful garden with a balcony that runs over the top of it. So do you see the balcony in this picture? It's where they're standing. It's kind of like a deck. Two high-ranking princes live inside this palace. Also, inside the palace are 10 pools of water. Some of the pools are salt water and some are fresh water. In each of the pools live different kinds of birds. The birds that need salt water live in the saltwater pools, and the birds that need fresh water live in the freshwater pools. Each type of bird is given the type of food that it likes best, whether it is worms, maize, seeds, or fish. The royalty here, or the people of royal blood, like kings, queens, princes, and princesses, are able to just look out a window and be amused by the birds in various pools. I have tried to write these descriptions as truthfully as I can so that your majesty may have an accurate picture of this part of the world. So that whole thing that I just read was the body of that letter, okay? And here comes the closing. Your humble servant, and here comes the signature, Hernan Cortez. So, unfortunately for the Aztec people, Cortez's discovery led to Spain's conquest of Tenochtitlan and ultimately the end of the Aztec Empire. So that means that after Cortez went and visited and told the king how cool it was, the king of Spain came over and conquered them, which means took over them and ended the Aztec Empire. But we might learn a little bit more about that on another day, okay? So let's do our comprehension questions and our word work. If you need to take a quick wiggle break, feel free and then come right back, okay? All right, so where is Tenochtitlan located? Where is it? In Mexico, on an island in the middle of a lake, okay? And the lake that it is in the middle of is Lake Texcoco, okay? And how big does Cortez say that Moctezuma's empire is? At least as large as Spain, he believes. How does Cortez describe the markets in Tenochtitlan? He said there were lots of people, they had many different kinds of things to sell, like food, precious stones, shells, feathers, medicines, wood, coal, sleeping mats, clothing, pottery, you name it, okay? So now I want you to look at this picture, okay? How do the aqueducts supply the people in Tenochtitlan with water? The aqueducts were like pipes or bridges that carry water from the freshwater lake to the city, right? Okay. Other than the title, how would you know this reading was a letter? How about the way that this letter started, or the way that this story started? It started with a greeting, right? It started with Your Majesty, okay? And then at the end, it ended with Your humble servant, Hernan Cortez. So it ended with a closing and a signature, okay? All right. Now let's do our word work, okay? In our read aloud, you heard there are 4 entrances to this enormous city. I want you to say the word enormous for me. Sorry, guys, there's like something in my eyeball. Enormous. Can you say it in a mouse voice? Enormous. How about in a robot voice? Enormous. All right. If something is enormous, it means that it is really big, okay? The boy's suitcase was so enormous that he couldn't carry it himself. I want you to think of some things that are enormous. Try to use the word enormous when you tell about it. What's the word we've been talking about? Enormous. So I'm going to name several items or places. If the thing I name is enormous, say, that's enormous. If the thing I say is not enormous, I want you to say, that is not enormous. All right. A mouse. That's not enormous, right? And a mouse isn't very big. An elephant. That is enormous. Okay. A whale. That is enormous. An acorn, which is one of those little nuts that fall off of trees that squirrels like. That's not enormous. Our school. Well, it depends on what you're comparing it to. If you're comparing it to a person, a school can be enormous. If you're comparing it to an apartment building, it might not be enormous. Okay, so that kind of just depends on what you're comparing it to. Okay, let's make sure that we have hit all of our learning objectives for today. We identified the parts of a letter. We were able to identify key details about the Aztec Empire. And we demonstrated an understanding of the word enormous. And then before too long, you're going to write about the Aztec. All right, guys. Awesome, awesome job. I'll see you next time. Bye.